Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and we are back this week for an episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated. Well, that's right. I last time I gave you Special Missions issue number 1. We're back for issue number 2. It's shocking how that goes in order like that, isn't it? Long promised. It's been a long time since I've been meaning to circle back on these. So I'm happy to be finally doing them. I got to say, I have not read the Special Missions in, 20 years easily. Reread the original series. We went through it obviously for this show, but I've also reread the original series a lot more than I have gone back and reread the Special Missions. And they do not disappoint, man. They're really, really good. Listeners, if you're new to the show, this is the show where I've covered every single episode of the G.I. Joe cartoon from Sunbow to Extreme. And we included DIC in the middle. And we've also talked about every issue of the G.I. Joe Real American Hero comic book from Marvel Comics. And a whole bunch of other stuff. A bunch of fun stuff along the way. And I appreciate you. If you're new to the show, check out the back catalog. It's an evergreen show. You can go back and find your favorite episode or your favorite comic book and see what we had to say about it. And for you long-term listeners, I appreciate you coming along for the ride. I hope you enjoyed last week's G.I. Columbo replay. I got some very nice words from a lot of you listeners. Reached out and sent me love. And I appreciated that so very much. It means a lot. So excited to be getting back to some normalcy this week with G.I. Joe Special Missions. Man, this is a fantastic cover. It is just legendary. I love it. I love this cover so much. What we do here on the show for you new guys is we go over everything here, page by page, panel by panel. Excruciating detail. That's what I like to say. Because I've always looked at it like, or at least not always, the show treats it like it takes a long time to put together a comic book. So the least we can do is give it a half hour of dissection, right? Try to find the nooks and crannies, try to find the artistic inspirations or the moments that sometimes get overlooked, So that's what I try to do with, with the G.I. Joe illustrated portions of this show. Listeners, if you are out there on social media, if you're on Facebook still, or if you're on Twitter still, or if you're on Instagram, or if you're sending emails, you can find me at Joe on Joe Pod, or send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com and say hello. We do have a Patreon page at patreon.com/joeonjoepod. And, not posting as frequently, but I am keeping the show alive. So any support, any help is appreciated. All our Patreons, you are fabulous. And a couple of business things to cover. I've been talking to friend of the show, Josh Egabine. We're going to try to get some after action report interviews going, but I wanted to make sure that I covered it here just in case we don't end up getting together. Because life is crazy. And you heard him on a couple episodes ago. We talked about the G.I. Joe number 21 book. We had a huge giveaway, by the way. It was awesome. I hope everyone got their books and enjoyed it. But they have their next Kickstarter is live now. When you're hearing this, I think there's still about 30 days or 35 days or so left to go. By the time you hear this, it is for their Command Files Volume 2, which is the G.I. Joe character guide. This is the guide where Greg Augustin kind of breaks down the team into different teams. You know what I mean? Like this, we talked at length about this. I really enjoyed the first one. And it's taking all the characters that we love and saying, hey, if we were to reshuffle the deck today, what would they look like as like a real fighting unit? How would you break them down? Would the polar team just be polar people, or would they also include a couple communication people and maybe a ninja? That kind of idea. And it really does a great job. It's really deep. It's really lore heavy. If you're a fan of that kind of stuff, which I know I am, I really enjoyed it. So this is the second volume. This is the remainder of the Joe team. So this is on Kickstarter. Just search for The full name is Command Files Volume 2 G.I. Joe Character Guide After Action Report. I think if you just search for After Action Report, it should show up. So that's 41 days left when I'm recording this. That means maybe like end of June. It might be like June 30th might be the final day for it. But either way, you have a couple weeks left, but give them the support they need. They have hit their goal, so its program is going forward, and you need to get in there and get your book. I did hear a lot of you guys who won, and we gave away a lot of books. I think I mailed out like 18 books. Multiples of you guys that reached out said that the one book I sent you went then and reordered a bunch of their other stuff because you enjoyed it so much. So that's the goal. We want you to see the kind of great work these guys do over there at After Action Report and get in on that. As of this speaking, we also have the that was funded. The Hero Field Guides that got funded last week by Carson. That was a great looking book, and I want to draw some attention to someone. Oh shoot, it's only literally got 41 hours, but too late for you to back it. But I'm sure they might sell some after this. This was not G.I. Joe related, but this is awesome. And as soon as I saw this, I was like, this is an instant back for me. They're remastering the Gold Key Zorro comic books from like 1966 to 1967. And you're like, well, why? Yeah, Zorro, like, okay, Zorro's cool and all that stuff, but like, you're a huge Zorro fan. What I am is a huge fan of Alex Toth. And Alex Toth did a lot of the artwork on this. It's really pretty. So if you want to see some Alex Toth at his, like the apex of his powers, late 60s, mid-60s, late 60s. This book really looks cool. It's Zorro the Avenger, I think is the Zorro Remaster hardcover comic. And there's some new stuff. And, it's like any Kickstarter. There's all kinds of bells and whistles you can do. But they kind of had me at the Alex Toth stuff. And it's random recommendation. Let's check that out. Again, I'm not a massive Zorro fan, although I love me some Monster Matador. Don't get me wrong. But I can't wait for that book to come out. So anyway, G.I. Joe news aside, let me think. Anything crazy in the G.I. Joe world? No. You know what? We're going to dive right into special missions. Here we go. G.I. Joe Special Missions number 2, cover by Mike Zeck. This it's dynamite. It's Roadblock with his Ma Deuce perched on a sandbag barrier with a Clutch leaning over, firing his Uzi. They're all getting shot at. And Recondo blooping some mortars or rocket launchers from his handheld mortar cannon. Forget what his gun is named. And they look, but Recondo looks every bit of Jesse the Body from Predator in this. And it looks amazing. They're blowing up a city. We know they're in South America. It's just great. The posing on this cover is dynamite. You look at Roadblock, it's Mike Zeck. You look at Roadblock, his eyes are going in one direction. You see Clutch is looking in another direction, kind of the same way, but he's absolutely staring at someone else. And Rakondo's covering in a third direction. And you even see a bad guy falling and dying in the tower that Rakondo's hitting. You get depth of field on the cover. You have the guys that want to be featured. They're fully colored and full bright multicolored hues. Like, they look great. Although I'm looking at this in my cover, I feel like my cover's been out in the sun a little bit. It looks a little faded to my eyes. But they're in full color. And then the step behind them, most of the ground is all yellow anyway. But like in the distance, they do that wonderful comic book trick where they don't use full colors. They just go with a hue. So the house is, and the backdrop and the jungle behind it is like a blue hue. And it's yellow where the explosion is casting a light source on it. And that yellow is reflected not only on the one side of the building, but also on the two windows that arch the building. It just really gives a nice, strong 3D effect. And then when you have the ground just being yellow, like from the background all the way to the front. It adds that unifying element to put these in the same world and yet pop up front the guys that we care about. Really smart, really great cover. Like it's dynamite. And Roblox got that trademark Mike Zeck thin jaw when he's yelling. If you picture Mike Zeck's Punisher jumping out of the screen, you always saw his jaw got really thin because he was screaming so hard. He's got Roblox doing that. I love that. I always love seeing that. So yeah, that's just dynamite. This is it's a great cover. It's called Words of Honor, and it is it's got the indicia of December '86. So doing the math on that, this was probably on the stands like September or maybe August of '86. December '86 would have been the date that newsstands would take it off. So for more on that, listen to any other one of our Joe and Joe Illustrated episodes. I always dig into that, and we always try to keep up with what month. So this would have been like August '86. So think about where you were, when you were, and I'm just gonna throw this out there, just blanket this whole book with kudos for Larry for going at this topic, man. Going at the topic of Nazis and concentration camps and Nazi swine hiding in the jungles of South America with stolen Jewish gold. This is something like I said, haven't read this in a very long time. I completely forgot that G.I. Joe ever dealt with a topic like this. 100% did not remember. And this is why Special Missions is fantastic. It gives them space to deal with more real world issues, because this was a thing that actually was a thing where the Nazis fled to South America, and giving Larry the room and the balls to tell a story like this is fantastic, and I would say nigh unheard of. Like, only in a world where they're kind of not paying attention, I think, do you get away with this story. It's amazing. It's so good from start to finish. And I don't normally like to preface a book, because I try not to do these as reviews. I try to do them as like dissertations or breakdowns, But at the end, I'll be like, I love to get, iffy. This book is awesome. This book is awesome from start to finish. So to caveat with that, this book's great. So we open with two splash page, a 2-panel splash page, wide shots, big pictures. It's the Joes in front of a display, and they're looking at the Knudsen Glacier. It's on the southern coast of Greenland. And they explain, that a glacier is more or less a river of ice moving by inches towards the sea. So we all know enough about global warming. We understand what glaciers are. And what's happening here is, as it melts, a plane that has been apparently frozen inside the glacier at some point in time, back during World War II, is starting to peek out of it. This is very much shades of Captain America, which they obviously would have been aware of. That's what happened to Cap, although he was more of just a frozen a chunk of ice. It wasn't necessarily a glacier, but same kind of thing. He was a chunk of ice, and as waters warmed and time went on, that's how the Avengers found him, floating in the Arctic. So that's what's happening to this plane here. It is a Nazi bomber, a German bomber, in southern Greenland. And how did it get that far? They say it had a maximum range of 2,000 miles. And then there's an explanation that they could have had refueling stations on the glaciers, because you would have, especially back then, you would have had to fly past Greenland if you were on your way from German-occupied Spitsbergen to bomb New York. I mean, so very Captain America, but it's also very ominous of the Joes, who are fictional, are stepping into real history of, these are real things that we know happened in our world, and here are our heroes interacting with that stuff. That's cool. That's untrod territory for these books. Script by Larry Hama, art by Herb Trimpe, the legend. Bob Sharon did coloring, really great job. Phil Felix is on letterer. Did I say Herb Trimpe lettering? Herb Trimpe did the penciling. Sorry about that. Herb Trimpe, the legend, did the penciling. Phil Felix is lettering. Bob Harris is the editor. and Jim Shooter's the editor-in-chief. So kudos to Harris and Shooter for greenlighting this story, not only just for the inclusion of the Nazis and all that stuff, but the resolution, the way it plays out. It's all very sophisticated storytelling, as we're going to get into. So Hawk is filling the guys in on what they perceive the story to be. This is as much as the guys know right now, because they don't necessarily have a bibliography on this plane. For some reason, the Condor crashed on a glacier. We're getting some visuals as in the form of flashback here. And we see this plane theoretically crashing into the glacier. And it buried it in the ice. Snowfall covered all the traces of it, so no one saw it for 40 years. So when it made the papers, because the Joes weren't the ones to find it, so like some locals were like, "Hey, look at that Nazi plane." It made the papers around the world, and it flushed out a wanted Nazi war criminal, a geriatric goose-stepper named Herr Dr. Otto Totenschnadel. He was the ex-head of a poison gas research at Sachsenhausen Konzentrationslager, which is a real concentration camp. It was one of the first ones built, and it is a place that existed. And again, to use the real world stuff in it is wild. And a credit to the creators here. Totenschnadel says the gas is still deadly, and the fall from the bomber when it cracks off the glacier could release the gas into the southerly wind currents, which would then, send it towards the east coast of the United States. So Hawk is talking to Snowjob and Alpine and it looks like Breaker and Airtight, which I love using. I love using Airtight. I love using all these dudes. That's why the special missions were great, because they made use of the less utilized characters. Snowjob's not happy about any of this. He's like, "Why are we making deals with Nazis?" And Hawk reminds him, "Keeping the deal isn't your problem, Snowjob. Your problem is leading the mission to the glacier to neutralize the gas." So it's Airtight, Alpine, Breaker, the rest of the Arctic team. Keeping the deal in Brazil is a problem for Clutch, Roadblock, Recondo, and Dial Tone, because it seems that Totenschnadel doesn't want this deal to be made public to his fellow Nazis, which is great storytelling. So we're already in the middle of this mission, and we didn't even know it. We thought we were getting the start of this mission. Oh, no. Hawk's already sent dudes who aren't even in this briefing down to South America in Brazil to start to, cut this end of the deal. So that's great. So they're already there. They're outside of this compound on the next page. And they realize that getting in to talk to Otto is not going to be easy, because even though he reached out and says he wants to make a deal, he's still being guarded by all these Nazis, which, I don't know why you wouldn't just go in and shoot them all, but you know what I mean? They need to keep him alive. So Clutch is, he's the one, he's scouting on the binoculars. And we get told here that, in case you didn't know, I believe his name Katzenbogen, right? Is Clutch's last name. Demons from his childhood. His grandmother lived with him, and she was, she had lived in a concentration camp. So she had blue numbers tattooed on her arm. She came into my room one day while I was watching TV, a sitcom about POWs during World War II. The one with the funny Nazis. She started screaming. She never stopped screaming. It was as if she had been on hold for 25 years, and the horror finally caught up with her. Nazis give me the freezing willies. But if we get in there and parlay with Totenschnadel, then we better get a move on. So Clutch is like, "I got a job to do, and I'll do it, but just so you know, this affected me personally." And again, a great way to make it personal, a great storytelling technique to fill us in. And by us, I mean, we didn't think about where you were in 1986. You didn't know, a lot of this we didn't know, right? A lot of it we did, but like Schindler's List hadn't come out yet. Boys from Brazil had been out, I think was that like 77 or 78, but there was still an era of acknowledgement and recognition of the horrors of World War II in Nazi Germany that to this day is still, like, there's a reason some morons out there still deny that it ever happened. And I think a lot of it was shame-based. Obviously, no one feels good about it. but there's shame around it. We don't talk about this stuff. So there was in a pre-internet era, in a pre-24 news hour cycle era, there was a lot of learning that the world had to do to catch up to back in 1986 about what this was. And I think Larry handles this very deftly. So, really a deft writing hand with this. So on the next page, we find out that, and Clutch, by the way, is interrupted by a balloon that says, I think maybe you gringos are not going anywhere. And we get a dude comes out of the woods. I'm not sure if he says his name here. Oh, Ibrahim. Yeah, Ibrahim. And he says, us banditos don't take kindly to having our prey stolen from us. So this is great because Recondo, being the expert that he is, says, if you're banditos, my Aunt Tildy can spit bowling balls. Recondo sees right through it. These guys aren't local. And Roadblock picks up on that, and they're Mossad. They're the special branch of Israeli intelligence. And they're also chasing after Totenschnadel. And they have the jump on the Joes. So the Joes drop their weapons, even though they're all kind of both on the same side, but obviously the Joes have a reason to be there that's a little bit different from Ibrahim and his crew. And this is another part of the story that is really intricate and very cool. Roadblock kind of says, like, you don't, like, you're Mossad, and Ibrahim says his people can trace his lineage back to the reign of Solomon. And this next panel, I think I think it's Roadblock and Recondo being on the same page based on what happens later. I think it's them going, we got to get an out here. And the fact that it's not spoon-fed to us and we only find out later on, but in this moment, it's a shocking moment. Recondo is saying these guys are after Totenschnadel. They're either going to kill him or haul him back for trial. We have a deal. And Roadblock punches him in the face and knocks him unconscious. So you're reading this thinking, and literally Recondo's laying there unconscious. You're like, Roadblock, that's pretty aggressive for your own guy, right? And you just linger with that for a few pages. It does not become apparent to me that it was kind of, that it is what it's going to become. So he knocks out Recondo. They cover, he says, it's going to rain tonight. Ibrahim says, it's going to rain tonight. So let's cover your front up with a poncho so he doesn't get soaking wet, right? So over on the veranda of this Nazi stronghold, we see Totenschnadel for the first time. And he's old and bald and decrepit and dying, he's having a glass of wine, but he thinks that the Jews are coming for him. So he hears something. So he truly may have heard the Jews in the jungle, but he's definitely paranoid is what it is. His Nazi guard says, even if they knew you were here, our defenses are impregnable. And you see the paranoia of Totenschnadel here. And Trimpe does this great comic book move, which is, we've seen it before, and it's just so smart, so well done. You start, the bottom three panels are same size. You start with like a medium or distant shot of the guy talking, and you're trying to get into his head, and he says, they're very clever, Hans. And then the camera zooms in, and you see his full face, and it says, someone's telling him, you gotta learn to relax, dude. Like, we've been hiding for years now. You're with us. You're cool. You're fine. And the New Reich will take care of you, Dr. Totenschnadel. We won't let the Jews kill a hero of the fatherland. But the camera just zooms in on Totenschnadel's eyes as they get wider. And whatever the emotion the cartoonist, the artist is trying to convey here, whether it's, paranoia or suspicion or romance or curiosity, whatever it is, that move of long shot, zoom in, closer. Obviously, in film, you just do a camera zoom. But in comic books, you pace it like that. It says everything that you want your scene to say. It forces you, the viewer, to feel that, to just get into that because of the pacing of the scene. If it's one panel, you could read a lot into it. If it's one camera angle from one direction and then the next panel from another direction, again, it's a little harder emotionally to convey that. But when you make that camera move of boom, 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 it makes whatever the emotion is they're trying to get across you, it makes you, the viewer, sit with it for those three panels that you're reading. And it's very effective in comic book storytelling. So back in Greenland, we've got the guys in a tomahawk, and they're flying over the very very crumbling glacier. It's continually breaking off. At this rate, the plane will overbalance and tumble within hours. Lift Ticket is flying. It's always good to see him. And Breaker asks, should I have Lift Ticket hover over the plane and rappel us down? But Alpine makes the call. The wash from the props would put too much pressure on the wings, which, think about it. Those wings are meant to react to air pressure. So by throwing that much air pressure on it, the whole plane would vibrate. Super smart by Larry. Whether, I don't know if it's true or not, but it totally makes sense to me. Then if you have those wings bouncing, that plane becomes more unstable. Airtight can't see the gases, the canisters inside at all. So he's going to have to get inside to have any idea of what shape they're in. They can't land on the cliff edge of the glacier because it's the lateral fissures. If they turn into fractures, then the whole thing crumbles. So they can't land the Tomahawk helicopter. And we have Lift Ticket saying that he can't even land it. Like, not the idea of parking it on there is one thing that they can't do, but he can't even land to get them off the Tomahawk because the steep is on too much of an incline. So he has to use the winch to get him down. Whether or not this was an intentional thing or not, a fantastic way to use the winch that was on the toy of the Tomahawk, which, come on, Tomahawk top 5 of the big toys. Tomahawk was an amazing toy. And that winch was always coming in handy. So they use it on here to winch the guys down to the glacier top. And they even use fuel as an excuse to say he can't hang around and hover this whole time. He has to go back to the flag to refuel. And to make it even more perilous, Snowjob says, well, it doesn't matter. Because if something goes wrong here, Lift Ticket ain't going to be able to save us. Like, we're going to die so fast. Whether it's by the gas or by the glacier crumbling, Lift Ticket will have absolutely nothing to do, so we might as well go back to the flag. Awesome. Really great. So they're starting to rappel down, by they being Alpine and Airtight. And we got Snowjob and Breaker. They're bracing them on top. They're kind of anchoring them. So they've got the Pythons dug into the ice for sure, but then they're helping brace them to make it a little easier for them. Even within this, though, Snowjob says if he would have done it right, he would have had heavy lifted a chopper. I'm sorry, he would have heavy lifted a tracked vehicle half a mile up the glacier. Then we could have driven down slowly with power winches and other good stuff. In other words, they could have tracked. It sounds like what he's saying is the tracked vehicle itself would have been moored in and slowly unraveled them as well. So you would have had real power on it. So they could go back up and down very fast instead of just human rappelling. This does multiple things in this moment. It shows both Snowjob's expertise, which is what we all love about every issue of G.I. Joe. We love seeing these dudes, experts in their field, bring some of that to the table. We're talking about Alpine knows about how to rappel. We're going to see Airtight dealing with the gas later. And seeing Snowjob instantly go, this is how we should do it, but too bad we don't have time, so we're going to have to make do. So that's great. But then it provides a great punchline in this fourth panel. The camera zooms, kind of flips up and goes horizontal. And we see that it says just like Cobra's doing right now. So we've got a Cobra Hiss tank that's doing pretty much exactly what they said, slowly coming up the ice shelf towards them. And apparently Totschnadel had told Cobra about this first, trying to get cut a deal with them. And they're a little late to the game to get there. But as Firefly says, who's the only named Cobra in this, and that's important because he's the only one that gets out alive. He says getting there first doesn't count for everything. Leaving alive is the important thing. More ominous words have never been spoken to three dudes that are gonna die. So meanwhile, back in Brazil, it is raining heavily, and Clutch and Ibrahim are having a talk. There's no fire because it's raining, but sitting by the fire having a chat. It's that kind of a conversation. Ibrahim's been explaining that his team's been tracking Toten Schnadel for 8 years. Do you know what he did to my people? And Clutch explains they're my people too, you know? But that gas is going to kill millions if we don't defuse it properly. And so he's going to provide the proper disarming sequence. And Ibrahim basically says, I don't believe this guy. Like, he'd say anything to save his life. And he goes into further explanations here. And this is where it gets really real and grisly. The man who ran experiments on prisoners at Sachsenhausen and Natzweiler Struthof, his specialty was nerve toxins. He was instrumental in developing a nerve agent called Sarin Plus, a toxin so strong that 1/100th of a milligram can kill a full-grown man by neutralizing the actions of the enzyme cholinesterase. And it's essential to the transmission of nerve impulses. So if you have no nerves, then you have no vital functions. It's particularly excruciating way to die. And he said his test subjects, quote unquote, numbered in the thousands. And this is the foul creature that you wish to deal with? Do we simply say Kaddish and sweep their memory away for the sake of expediency? Like, he's not wrong. That's the other great thing about this story is no one is wrong here. Everyone has a very valid reason for the choices they make in this story. Cobra's pretty much an afterthought, really. But they're there to just throw some action on the glacier. But, like, the Joes in both scenarios are doing what they think is best. Ibrahim's doing what he thinks is best. When the Joes make different decisions later on in the story, they do what, again, they think it's great. And at this point, Ibrahim says, hey, your friend, they got knocked unconscious. Why he's still laying under that tarp? Like, is he, oh, turns out he's gone. That's right. Recondo snuck out. That whole punch Recondo in the face, that was a setup. I love that they didn't tell us about it. They just did it because, it is out of care. Why would Roadblock punch his buddy in the face? No, they did it to set something up for later because they knew they were snookered and they were going to have to talk their way out of it. So Recondo has now snuck onto the base, very reminiscent of when he snuck back and took out the two Caros. And you see him crawling all over this Nazi base, sneaking in, and it's hilarious because he absolutely does sneak in until the very end when he reaches the building where the Totenschnadel is, and Recondo chooses to shatter the glass and leap through. Like, he couldn't gently slide it open or find an open door or knock on a window because this guy's expecting them. No, Roadblock or Recondo just shatters it. So Totenschnadel is expecting him, and he says, sit down, let's make a deal. And, maybe for the first time in G.I. Joe comic books, we got straight up swastika flags being drawn here. In the front of the book, when they showed the pictures, no, there's a swastika on the tail of the plane, but it was more the Iron Cross they were showing. But there is a swastika on the second page, and you get a straight up like the red with the white circle Nazi flag sitting behind this dude in his little bungalow. So back in Greenland, we realize Cobra's actually not shooting at the guys because they don't want to crack the ice. So they're just going to literally run the Joes over, which is smart and something I'd give Firefly credit for. But Snowjob says, no one's going to turn me in a hamburger without me putting up a fight. So Snowjob's like, we got nothing to lose. Let's just shoot at them. And while that's happening, Alpine and Airtight hear the gunfire and they get a little worried. So they better start hurrying down the thing. And Breaker pulls a grenade out and is like, if you thought gunfire would be bad, he's just going to throw a grenade on the glacier. But he realizes that he can't let Cobra get the gas. They would blackmail the entire world. So whatever the cost, whether it's them dying or not, that's the only move they have. And what he does is he doesn't necessarily damage the tank, although, maybe a little bit, but it's more that the treads are now in the blast crater of the grenade. And that's putting the HISS tank like on a slide. And so it can't really grab the kind of traction that it needs. And so it goes sliding to the edge, and all the Cobra soldiers jump off with the exception of the driver as the HISS tank plummets over the edge. The driver grabs onto a ledge, but that ledge is like 15 feet below the full edge of the thing. So the driver is going to need a lot of help to get up. The Cobras, including Firefly, they dig in, take cover. We see that the driver is alive, but barely hanging on. And Breaker says he was just trying to blow off a tread. Hey, but apparently it worked. Back in Brazil, we get Totenschnadel's story, at least out of his mouth. It says he was living quite comfortably in Buenos Aires until that blasted Ibrahim started sniffing around. After I was forced to accept the hospitality of Hans and his organization. But all that is over now. Soon you will have the disarming codes for the gas canisters, and I can resume living my life in the manner befitting my status. And now we get to the deal that Ricondo's trying to talk about. How much money do you want for this little secret of yours? And we learn that Totenschnadel has all the money he needs because he has gold bullion from the Reich Treasury. Sure, it's from the Reich Treasury. What he needs is sanctuary. He needs protection from the Joes, from the Joes, from the Israelis. And he needs assurances that they'll honor the arrangement, and Ricondo says you'll have to take our word for it. The drawing of the way that they draw Totenschnadel here, that Trimpe does, is obviously intentional. And he looks so skeletal and emaciated. It's almost as if Trimpe is drawing him to look like one of the concentration camp victims that Totenschnadel would have overseen 40 years earlier. I gotta feel that that's intentional. Like that's a move, like this man is turned into that which he caused. There's a shadow drawn here in this final panel that gives him a very Hitler-esque mustache. That I don't know if that's again, everything's intentional. They know what they're doing. But if the intention there is to make it look like Hitler, or I don't know. I don't want to draw too much attention. But the design of Totenschnadel himself is very emaciated, stringy, like almost non-existent, stringy bald head hair. Not very well. So again, bold stuff for 1986 G.I. Joe. So back out in the jungle, Ibrahim realizes that, all right, well, he knows Ricondo's in, so we got to move right now before Ricondo makes his cursed deal with Totenschnadel and betrays our position. He doesn't trust that they're not going to get ratted out. And Clutch basically is like, he would never rat them out. Like, he hates that guy as much as you or I, but we have a mission, and Clutch reaches him with, if you're determined to storm the house, all bets are off. Give us this. And this whole conversation is very tricky, and I think it's handled really well. So give us back our weapons and we'll help you. 3 more experienced troopers could not hurt we'll help. And then he asks, how do I know you won't turn on us after the objective is reached? Your orders contradict ours. And Clutch replies with, yeah, I'm obligated to carry out my mission, but consider this. If we succeed, the chances are very good that you will still outnumber us 3-1. So you have that little faith in your own skill. So he plays on his ego a little bit. And that convinces him to say, all right, give these guys back their weapons. So it's very much the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Also, like, we're not enemies, but we do have different, we do have different goals here. Meanwhile, back in Greenland, Alpine and Airtight have reached the cockpit, the canopy of the airplane, and they're sliding in. They got to be very careful. As Airtight is making his way through the fuselage, Alpine finds a flight log because he says, might be some interesting stuff in here. Luftwaffe pilots were sticklers for details. So Airtight finds the anti-tampering systems. They're still in operating order. And we do learn that Alpine speaks German, which is awesome because there's lots of mountains in Germany and Switzerland, and that's what he specializes in. So they find these gas canisters, and Airtight is trying to figure out how to break them down. But he should be able to figure out because it is 40-year-old technology. So he just needs a few minutes to kind of sort it out. But remember that his tank driver is hanging on the edge of the cliff, and he knows that he's going to die in about 5 minutes. Like, it's not going to be able to hang on forever. So he's going to take those Joes with him. And he pulls his pistol, and he starts shooting up the cockpit. Now, he does shoot through the log before we can hear what the log says. But Alpine has read what the log says. But we don't get to know it as the viewer because it's interrupted by gunfire. So he says, listen to this. It says, ba-ding, ba-ding, ba-ding. So that's a really great teaser, storytelling-wise. You get a little tease that Alpine found something, but we are actually interrupted by something that's important so we don't get to learn what it is. It's a plausible way to do. I don't have time to explain. We have to go. Like you see that, like South Park famously made fun of that one time with Cartman being like, they're making a long walk across town. And they're like, tell us what's up. He's like, I don't have time to explain. And they continue this long walk across town. I don't have time to explain. One of my pet peeves in action movies, when they start conversations in like a plane in Washington, D.C., and they finish the conversation when the plane touches down in Seattle. And I'm like, it's the same conversation for 6 hours of air flight? Really? Anyway, this legitimately gets busted up. And Airtight is making his moves, but he just got past. He's not there yet. So he needs a couple more minutes to get the job done. But as it happens, one of the bullets punctures one of the gas canisters, and Airtight is hoping that it's a binary agent. And we cut to, back in Brazil, a close-up of Clutch yelling charge. And it's a full-on storm the castle situation. Roadblock back-to-back with one of the Mossad soldiers. Talking about the, quote, master race. Sure ain't putting up a good fight. And that eye patch dude from earlier, the one Nazi guard, I don't know if I mentioned he had an eye patch. He's distinguished because by an eye patch and a kind of a chef's apron. He comes in, he's like, Otto, the house is under siege. And what? Was ist los? And Totenschnadel says, meet one of my new protectors. So now everybody gets caught up here. So now it's a very much a Mexican standoff in there, right? So we got a lot of guys with a lot of guns and a lot of people. And Rakondo is explaining, we were cool. We were figuring this out. And then you guys came in and shot everybody up. Back in Greenland, and this also, pacing-wise, this is, Larry is the master of this. He went from multiple pages to tell each part of the story to now it's going page to page to page to page, right? So back on Greenland, we get further explanation from Airtight that the binary agent has to have two parts. You have to combine them to create one single toxin. We all saw this famously in Die Hard with a Vengeance. That would have been a couple years later. But us Joe readers, when we saw that in Die Hard with a Vengeance, we already knew what a binary agent was from Special Missions issue number 2. So Airtight says his readings do absolutely indicate it's a binary agent. However, it's also very flammable. So it'll burn off, but we need to get out of here. Let's start venting the flammable mixture into the air. This is Alpine saying, start venting the flammable mixture. The whole thing will disperse. It'll all go in the water. Everything will be fine. We'll all be safe. So they've confirmed it. They're going to be fine. We do catch up with Firefly. He's on top of the glacier, and he's shooting at the Joes now. Alpine and Airtight have finished the last valve. They've kind of loosened everything, so everything's getting released right now. Meanwhile, the two Cobra soldiers are coming over the side. And as they exit the canopy, Alpine and Airtight exit the canopy, they know that it's going to take a long time because they have to climb all the way back up. They don't have machinery or anything. And Breaker and Snowjob have a great idea. They're still connected by the safety lines, and they realize there's a crevasse that has opened up behind them. And so they jump into the crevasse, like falling off a cliff, and that zips the guys up from the other side of the cliff. I will say this, artistically, this is a tough one. Artistically, this is hard to convey, and they don't really make a great attempt to it, but it is covered by the dialogue that Larry covers it. It is, I don't know how you would do this. They never pull back and really show it at work, the whole seesawness of it. And it's probably for the better that we don't see it, because showing it would have seemed a little implausible, but to do that, you would have to pull back really far. But this action is so fast paced right now, you don't want to pull back that far. You want to stay close to these guys. So we get a verbal explanation of what they're doing instead of seeing it in action, which I'm 100% fine with in this situation. And you see the guys get zoomed up from the plane. As the Cobras hit the wing of the plane, their boots are full of, or they're metal. They're steel-toed boots, like cleats to walk in the ice. Their cleats hit the plane surface, throw some sparks, and you get a giant explosion. Cobras die. The Cobras, his driver was dead already. And then the Joes are now... So now it's Alpine and Airtight at the top of the crevasse, of the other side of the crevasse. And they're making jokes. Like, you guys are always falling down the job. And they're like, very funny. How about getting us back up so we can radio Brazil? So the Joes were successful. And Dial Tone, Dial Tone finally has something to do in this story. He's been absolutely absent from this story. Except to accept a phone call in the page 28. Page 20 of the story. He gets a phone call. He's at Clutch. I got a bounce from Greenland. And this is for us, for our edification. The gas has been neutralized, but Firefly got away. Like, Clutch didn't even know Firefly was a part of this. Like, he doesn't, that's for us. So the gas has been neutralized. And as soon as Clutch hears that, takes the call, confirms it. And then Totenschnadel is like, well, wait, what? Like, you did it without my help. Well, then what do you need me for? Like, we have a deal. You give me your word. And Alpine tells Clutch what he found in the cockpit. He writes some choice excerpts from the flight log. And according to the flight log, there were 2 bombers on that last mission. The first objective was the poison gas raid, but the second objective was to transport gold looted from prisoners in the Sachsenhausen to Argentina to be the seed fund towards starting a new Reich. And the last entry in that log is a note of an emergency landing to help the second bomber's crew repair a hydraulic line failure. So Clutch says it's easy to figure out the rest. Totenschnadel was the pilot of the plane with the quote-unquote hydraulic trouble. That was just a ruse to get the other plane landed. So Totenschnadel was on the plane with the gas. So when the plane with the gold landed, Otto knew that if they carried out their primary mission, the Allies would never stop looking for them. And he had no intention of being a martyr for Hitler. So Otto, when the second plane loaded with gold landed, he shot and killed everybody, stuffed all of their bodies into the gas plane, and then he flew off with the gold plane and went to Buenos Aires. And so Ricano says, that's where this valise full of gold really came from. I never quite swallowed the Reich Treasury story, Otto. And he goes, and what about this photo album? And it's photos of Otto's life, this life that he led. Penthouse apartments, luxury towers, beautiful women, fast cars. He sold out the Reich for personal gain and thought he could get the good guys to help him get away with it. So it's important that he's saying this out loud, because over their shoulders, that is the patch guy. And the patch guy says, well, wait, he told us that Totenschnadel told us that he was living a life of poverty in Argentina. And Totenschnadel's like, so I never said I was a good person. Like, Joe's, you made a deal to protect me from the Israelis. You're going to honor that? And the Israelis kind of figure out what's up. And they're like, yeah, we made a deal. Wakana's like, we made a deal. Hey, Israelis, why don't you get on out of here ahead of us? And the Israelis are like, we understand fully. We will go peacefully. All right, let's go, Joes. And then Totenschnadel realizes he's screwed because they're leaving him alone with Hans and the rest of the guys. Clutch says, we made a deal to protect you from the Israelis. We never made a deal to protect you from your own kind. And so the door closes, and these 2 Nazis, who, I gotta say, I would have been fine with the Joes just shooting everybody here, but the 2 Nazis take care of Totenschnadel. And please, Hans, I'll give you all the gold, blah, 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 blah. And they do, it's the same camera move. Oh, this is great. It's the same camera move I was gushing over earlier with the close-up. There's a far shot of the Joes all walking out, and then the camera zooms in. You get a close-up of Clutch, like a mid shot of Clutch, and then the camera zooms in, and you get a close-up shot of Clutch's face, and it's that same effect we were talking earlier of this is a man with things on his mind. And that's how the story ends. It's awesome. It's great. Absolutely great. Like dynamite. This book is firing on all cylinders. like I said, the Cobra stuff is totally incidental, like the actual fireflyness of it all. But you do need a little bit of action. Like if you could stage that, if you were doing a movie, you could stage that action with just being man versus nature and have it be, exciting ice action and stuff like that. But I can see how that doesn't play that well in a comic book. You need some shooting and obviously Cobra, but you need some, shooting and some more action. But if you were doing this in, like, let's say this was a Stallone movie or something, you totally could do it like that movie Cliffhanger, where it's exciting because they're on the ice and the ice is the enemy and they're racing against time to figure out all this stuff. And it's the cracking of the ice provides the tension. But absolutely that would not translate very well into this comic book. Because it would then be balanced from a firefighting perspective, gunplay perspective, the action that's happening in South America. So it would be bad if you're doing a film of this episode, of this issue, you could do it like that. But for the medium, perfect. No notes, strong, absolutely fabulous. Kudos to everyone involved for dealing with a very touchy subject at a time that needed it. And man, crazy. So good. So I hope you all enjoyed my deep dive into Special Missions number 2. That's it for today. Wow, holy cow, it's 50 minutes already. Well, now you Joe. Joeing is half the battle.